Hi, I'm Roy Porter.
And I'm Justin Porter. And
Welcome to the Porter Perspective.
Looking ahead, what are your hopes for the future of Porter Family Exteriors? And what kind of impact do you envision the company making in the next 10 to 20 years?
Well, I'd like to be a household name in every home in the market areas we service and continue that into the new regions we're expanding into.
Looking back at when you started Porter Family Exteriors, what inspired you to take that first step in the business? Were there any key moments that solidified your decision?
Well, I'm not going to lie to you, okay? Money was a motivator. I wanted to make more than I was making working for someone else. I thought I could do a better job than what I was seeing being installed out there. What solidified it? In the beginning, I questioned whether I made the right decisions, because I was working twice as long for half the money. I knew how to do construction. I had been blessed with a lot of talents, but running a business was a different story. What I found was that money motivator wasn't going to happen overnight.
That's the truth. Awesome. All right, so then, as a founder, you were faced with a lot of challenges. What were some of the hardest obstacles you encountered in the early years, and how did you overcome them?
Boy, I guess one of the first thing was getting work, acquiring work. In those days, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have computers, we didn't have social media. It was, did somebody see you doing a job? You go and talk to them. Did it look? You go and knock on a door. Looks like your gutters are falling off or whatever. So it was, that was a big obstacle. And then having the men to do the work, to do it the way you would want it done. So being recognized as a legitimate company. Like some of my clients were older, and for them, being legitimate meant you had to be in the yellow pages. If you weren't in the yellow pages, you weren't legitimate, Yellow pages. So one of the other things in the beginning, was cash flow was an issue.
Right.
So being in the yellow pages meant subscribing to a 12-month issue, more expenses going out. It was a risk I had to take because I needed to be recognized among the older clienteles. In those days, they were the ones who owned properties. I did subscribe to the Yellow Pages. I continued to network with the clients that I had. Continued to do the philosophy of doing things right. See, the main thing that I wanted to base everything on was honesty, service, knowledge, respect for their properties, and for them, quality work at a fair price. I continued to do those things. If I made a mistake, I corrected it and moved on and was successful as a result of doing those things, even though some of them cost me, money on the job. I didn't make my profit that I thought I would, So, but continuing to stay on track with doing the quality job at a fair price, being honest with people, being of service to them. Which again, like I said, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have social media, we didn't have computers, so it meant going to their home and meeting with them in the evening if they had a question on something, going out on a weekend and taking a look at what their concern was and discussing, making a plan to take care of that. We always had a satisfied customer because I knew if they were satisfied, they would mention to their neighbor, and hopefully I would get another job.
Awesome, great stuff. Now that I'm in the role as CEO, what advice do you have for me as I continue to steer the company forward, especially in terms of leadership and maintaining a family legacy? That's a fun one.
Well, the word that comes into mind for me is warrior, okay? And by warrior, I don't mean going out and putting on your toll belt and working 18 hours a day. I mean, quietly listen, okay? Boldly trust and take action with might. So what I mean by that is listen to what your employees have to say, listen to what your clients have to say, and, fit that into the changes that you want to make. Trust that you can do it. Trust that it will be successful. And then take action, which is something, you do. So I guess it would be to continue to be the leader that you are here and now.
Gotta stop. I want to start crying over here. All right. Looking ahead, what are your hopes for the future of Porter Family Exteriors? What kind of impact do you envision the company making in the next 10 to 20 years?
Well, I want to continue to be known in the household name as a quality at a fair price. That honest service, knowledge, and respect that I talked about earlier. As long as that is still how people view us, that we're in service to them, that we respect their homes, that we have our employees feel that way too. Carrying that on to them because they're who are out there representing us today. Continuing that core value of knowledge and quality service.
Awesome. Were there any pivotal moments where you had to take a big risk, either personally or professionally, that paid off in the long run?
I took a lot of different risks along the way. Some worked out, some didn't. Wanted to expand into a more restricted area because there were a lot of contractors out there doing the work that we did.
Right.
And I wanted to be a little different, and I bought a Alcoa roof franchise. We got selected for that and went forward with it because the company disbanded that. That didn't work out. However, the people that I met initially through that did. Put a metal roof on a person's home that turned out to work for Amtrak, and we did a lot of work at the Amtrak plant down in Wilmington as a result, and he introduced me to a lot of other people. So taking that risk did put me in contact with some people that brought me into other areas of construction with the expanding. The same thing happened I was doing a house, a little row house, and this guy came over and wants to come up the ladder, and of course, the insurance companies don't want people climbing up the ladder and you risk, are they okay? Will they fall? But I let him come up and talk to him. It was his parents' house, and he wanted to see what was going on, because they had hired me without involving him, and he was a general contractor. So I let him come up, and I went through the whole thing with him. What we were doing, how we were doing it. And he asked me if I did commercial work, and I said, yeah. And we wound up here. He was building, at that time they were adding drive-throughs to all the McDonald's. And we wound up doing about 75 McDonald's as a result of taking the time, letting this man come up and see what was going on his parents' roof, because he knew there were a lot of contractors out there that weren't doing the job right, and he was impressed at how we did the job and invited us to do a McDonald's, which turned into 75 more McDonald's. Taking a risk sometimes does work out and sometimes doesn't.
Yeah, I remember the McDonald's. I would get paid $1 an hour back then. I was like a little kid. Put me to work early, that's for sure.
Yeah.
All right, last one here. When you first started the business, what were some of the key decisions that helped you differentiate Porter Family Exteriors from some of the others in the industry?
One of the big ones was protection. Like safety was big for us, but protection of the homeowner's property. Okay. We were one of the first, if not the first, to hang tarps down the side of the house so that when all the debris was falling, it didn't damage their sidewalls. We built plywood teepees over the plants so that we didn't crush the plants. You know, people don't realize when you're taking a roof off, you know, it's tons of debris that hits that ground, and those poor little plants get destroyed. Now, again, I'm going to be honest with you, I learned that by mistake. I broke a lady's, you know, I worked in an area where they had a lot of ground plantings and gardens, and I broke a lady's azalea bush, you know, which take a long time to grow. So to avoid that in the future, we put plywood teepees over the plants before we dropped the tarps. You know, have done that ever since, and many other contractors, most all, have followed suit and do that today.